Thank you very much, Ambuj. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here participating and presenting at this forum that has been organized by my friend and colleague Reggie. This is a very impressive activity that is being orchestrated, initiated by Reggie. So I think that to be part of this activity in the early stages in India is, I think Terry Moen, who was your speaker in the previous panel, Terry and I go back 10 years. He used to live in San Diego. So I think that I share that feeling with him. But as Ambuj was talking, I was taking a lot of notes. I'm a professor, but I'm also a student sometimes. I think some of the points that Ambuj you mentioned were absolutely, completely on the money. I mean, they were just so correct. And I actually want to go over those points before I get into my presentation. You talked about the technology, you talked about cost, affordability, and the fact that an electric car is 20 to 30% higher. And the answer is yes, it is higher. Unfortunately, that is the reality of the physics of the battery technology and where we are today. But think about it. When was the first large-scale commercial electric car introduced in America? 2 years ago. When was the first large-scale gasoline-fired car introduced in America? 100 years ago. So if you fast forward 100 years from today, what do you think the electric car will look like? I don't think we have the faintest clue. So we are literally in not even baby steps. We are in pre-baby steps of the electric car. And what a fine car it is. I drive a Nissan Leaf. I've driven it for 1 year and I decided I will not take it for repair until it just breaks down. This darn thing hasn't broken down. Nothing has happened. It's been over a year. And, I can't say that about my Mercedes that I've had, that it broke down the first 3-4 months. I'm just saying that there's something to be said about this new type of transportation in which there is no oil change. There is no filter. It's just like a little toy that you wind that toy. And when you were a kid, बच्चे थे तो wind करके वो चलता ही जाता था वो. It's the same thing. It's incredible. And so, but it's more expensive today. And so we have to deal with that. And how have they dealt with that in the US? They have given the policymakers have given some relief. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to sell anything. The world, we all love to talk big, but when it comes to, buying things, we vote with the purse and we look at what things cost. And therefore, in the US, the federal government gives a $7,500 rebate, plus the state of California was giving a $5,000 rebate. And now as they started to find that too many people were buying cars very quickly, so they reduced the rebate to $2,500. So you have a $10,000 rebate on a Nissan Leaf that, let's say, costs you $32,000. Well, by the time you take it home, it's $22,000, number one. Number two, you get to go on the carpool lane, which if anybody has visited Los Angeles, California, your Delhi traffic is not as bad as Los Angeles, California. Going on the carpool lane means you're driving at 80 miles per hour instead of 15 miles per hour. Our highways are also known as parking lots. The third piece is the cost of electricity in the US. Essentially, when I'm driving a car, I'm paying for petrol or gasoline, whatever you want to call that fuel. It's about $4 per gallon. When I charge my car at home or in the office, the effective cost of electricity is about $1 to $1.25 per gallon. That means your operating cost of fuel is about a third. And that means that it takes about 6 years to break even in the US for a typical electric vehicle. So this is not the future, people. This is today. We're there today. Nissan Leaf. I left America, 2.5 days ago. I'm completely messed up. And then I was in Korea, South Korea, and I was reading the news in the local newspaper. It said, Nissan Leaf lowers the price of the car, of the baseline car, by $6,000. Okay, so it's getting very competitive. At the auto show in December of 2012 in Los Angeles, every car company had a strategy or a product for sale, both for a plug-in hybrid as well as for a pure battery car. So this thing is happening in a very big way. Consumer acceptance, really good point. It's going to take a long time, When the internet came out in the late 70s, early 80s, it takes generations, 1 or 2 generations, okay? Not just, this is not just yet another software program that is a version of a Microsoft Office. This is a completely new way of doing things. You're not going to go to the gas station and charge your car. You leave your car at night in a garage, and in the morning, magically, it's fully charged. You go to the office, you park it, and in the evening when you go home, it's fully charged. You will have situations like your car breaks down. Well, it happened to me. What did I do? We have something called AAA in the US. They will either tow your car away, it's called American Automobile Association, or they will bring a truck with a diesel-powered level 3 charger that will give you 25 kilowatts onto the Nissan Leaf. In 10 minutes, you got enough juice to go home or go to the office. 25 kilowatts is a good amount of power. You can collect 5 kilowatt hours very quickly. Okay, and initially the way the mathematics and the curve works for lithium ion is initially when you are empty, you are actually sucking much more, a higher kilowatt rate. But it's going to take time. Space for larger battery pack. Actually, the battery pack is getting smaller, but it's still reasonably large. You talked about the fact there'll be a few million cars on the road in the U.S. So today, in the year 2012. We sold roughly 50 to 60,000 electric vehicles only. That's a small number, but what was it 3 years ago? 0. So that's pretty good. Okay, and in UCLA, just in our university, I have found a total of about 40 electric cars. Out of that, 20 electric car owners are participating with me in my test project, and I'm going to talk about what that test project is today. US also hopes to get into the 1 million car range, and I think by 2020 we will easily do that. I think we'll do this by maybe somewhere in the 2017 range. That is my personal estimate. But policies, you talked of policies, Ambuja, and that's brilliant. You've got to have policies. Every country that has implemented anything. Do you think the internet happened because Yahoo and Google invested in it? No, nothing. These guys just came in on the backs of the federal government. The US federal government completely funded the internet, and then these venture capitalists coolly came in and took all the credit for it. So everything, whether you look at highways, you look at airports, you look at the telecom lines, you look at the power system, the grid, everything gets funded by the central government, okay? So that's the way it is, and this thing in America is being funded by the central government primarily, and then some by the state government. And now the private industry comes in, and they can go make a profit selling all their products and services. Policy incentives. Look, Germany went down the path of solar starting in the 70s, okay? And today they are reaping the benefit of that. So it takes, like I said, a long time. You talked of efficiency of the drivetrain. Yes, it's pretty good, but it needs to get better, and there are research labs working. Charging your car, like I said, it's going to happen in the day, in the night, and so on and so forth. So there are some of these, interesting opportunities and challenges. Smart grids, that's the kind of stuff that we do. We are creating the smart charger, not only of the future, but also of the present. Remember, the future becomes the present very quickly in today's day and age. And I'll show you a picture of him. He used to be a professor, picture of him with me. He visited us. But just that one was a $3.4 billion investment into the US economy for R&D and demonstration. You talked of public charging infrastructure. Yes, it's a chicken and egg problem. In America, the state governments, the regional governments, the city governments, companies, private companies like Google, UCLA, they're all investing in this because they realize the benefits. Let's look at the benefit side. Okay, we're talking about the cost, benefit to society, pollution levels. In Los Angeles, when I landed in Los Angeles, I went from India in 1984. LA was the first city I landed in. And I was a little bit shocked to see how polluted it was. The air was actually terrible. Today, the air is about 70% cleaner. Why? Because they implemented clean air policies for public transportation, including CNG, including efficiency of cars, and so on and so forth. And now America is moving in that direction because they've realized the benefits of having transportation that is more efficient, and electric cars are going to be an absolute critical path for US to achieve that, and I think that really should be across the world. So you talked of peak loads, and you talked of the Indian infrastructure and the concern. Yes, actually, one has to be concerned, but let me tell you, at night when nothing is going on, why can't we charge the car, plug it into the grid, and take the power from the car and have it available in the afternoon for the grid or for the home? That is a technology that is being developed in my lab right now. I'll show you. It's called vehicle to grid. Okay? So that you see is a picture of me holding one of my favorite toys. I'm an engineer at heart, so I love toys. In my lab, I have about 30 people who work for me. We build toys. So that toy is actually a box in which gets installed on the wall, in which you can plug in electric cars, and it is connected wirelessly to a control center, and we monitor who's plugged in, the watts, the voltage, the amount of current flowing, the active power, for those of you who are techies, the reactive power, the frequencies, and all sorts of technical variables. And we take all that information, and with that information, we have mobile applications, mobile apps on Android and on iPhone for the user. We take the user preferences, and then we manage the charging in a smart way, such that if there's shortage of power on the grid right now, we will not charge you. So that's an example of a project. So let me first introduce our center. Our center is funded by, as I was talking about, one of the grants we have is a Department of Energy grant. And Department of Energy funds $60 million to the consortium of 4 partners with the local utility LADWP, which would be like one of your Delhi utilities, your Reliance or your Tata Delhi utility. And we are partnered with them. So that means that I'll show you the demonstrations we're doing. We're doing the demonstrations on campus, and then these demonstrations are also being installed in the utilities infrastructure and in the territory. And the idea is to do what? The idea is to demonstrate concepts like demand response that was talked about in the last panel discussion, electric vehicle integration, which I am heading up, and then consumer behavior, Ambush talked about that. And something that people haven't yet thought about but will happen in the future is cyber security. Then we also have components of microgrids and what is called advanced metering infrastructure. LA is a city that has roughly a load of 5,000 megawatts, just to give you an idea. Okay, and we're about 10% of the total load of the California, which is at around 50,000 megawatts. Okay, so and you know, essentially your UCLA is about 50 to 60 megawatt. So UCLA, our university, is it gives you some idea about what we're a fraction of. We're about 100th of the city of LA. The other project we have is with the Korea Institute for Energy Research that has to do with a creation of a smart green building in the context of a smart grid. That project is in the third year, and it's a 10-year project together with the Korean Institute for Energy Research. The third project is with EPRI, and I believe Annabelle Lee was a speaker here yesterday. Annabelle is our principal investigator from EPRI. We work with Annabelle on the cybersecurity. It's called the NESCORE project. I don't know if she talked about the NESCORE project, but I'm the principal investigator from UCLA in that consortium that she leads. The fourth project is the SMERC IPP. In the US, we have industries that work very closely with university labs like mine, and we have 18 member companies and 1 or 2 Indian companies as well. But these are all global companies. They are looking at the smart grid as an opportunity, whatever it means for them. And so they contribute by way of equipment and money and in-kind and expertise. Our center also hosts conferences. Our next one is a conference that is coming up soon. It's actually a training workshop on smart grid. We're inviting people not only from UCLA, but around, actually that date is wrong, I'm sorry. I'll have the correct date in my next slide. We have this thing called the Living Lab in UCLA, and I'll talk about what the Living Lab is. We have a cogeneration power plant, and we produce about 50 megawatts at peak. And then at peak, we purchase another 20 megawatts from the city of Los Angeles. That makes us an excellent partner for doing smart grid studies on the campus. The board, which we call the Leadership Council. And then, of course, like any other research university program, we teach. I still teach. In fact, my smart grid course was on Thursday morning, and I was able to convince the Nissan smart grid guy to give a talk in my class while I was on the plane somewhere. So, like I said, the next smart grid workshop is, oh, thank you. So the next smart grid workshop is on March 18th to 22nd. It's a training workshop. It's a week-long thing, and we have experts from the industry, including professors from other institutions who come and give talks. And you know, in the past, you know, we've been doing these workshops and conferences for, you know, over a decade now. And we bring in people from utilities, like you can see San Diego Gas and Electric, which is where Terry Moon used to work, by the way. Terry has been a speaker at my conference many, many times. We have people from EPRI, like Mark McGranahan, who's the vice president of EPRI, other utilities outside California. We have had the president of the California Public Utilities Commission, Mike Peavy. He used to be an executive at Edison. We also have folks from, I noticed we had Italians here today. We have had the chief executive officer of Enel Distribuzione, Livio Gallo, who's been a speaker. He's also on our advisory board, on that Leadership Council advisory board. And then, of course, folks from GE and a lot of other companies and NIST and other standards bodies and so on and so forth. Okay. I talked about the Leadership Council. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on. I talked about the Industry Partners Program. I'm going to move on. Let me say a few words about who the key players are, okay, in the United States. This is very critical. You know, in any organization, in any country, you know, there is always a issue of power and jurisdiction and who does what. And at the end of the day, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, right? I mean, you need to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed because of the reliability of that particular activity or function. In this case, the grid. You know, if important, you've got to have some of these, you know, state-run bodies and federal-run bodies. And one of the things that works really well in the U.S. is we have state regulators, like we have the California Public Utilities Commission. Then we also have the overseer at the federal level. We have what are called FERC and NERC. Okay, and so you see that you see sort of down there, FERC is the federal agency that regulates the interstate pipelines and interstate sales under the Natural Gas Act, right? But they do both electricity and so on and so forth. And NERC is another similar national level entity. So what happens is that, you know, it's like, you know, suppose you have two students fighting for a chair, right? And if there's no teacher in the room, well, they'll keep fighting and then one of them will kill the other or something like that will happen. Well, if you have a teacher who can be the moderator, the mediator, they can come in and they can say, no, you know, this is the equation and this is how this kid's going to get it today, this kid's going to get it tomorrow, or there is some equitable distribution. And you need to have that entity, and I think that in a lot of parts of the world, and I'm not very sure how the Indian grid is structured, but I think that having organizations at the top and organizations sort of at middle level working with each other, talking to each other, and you know, that will greatly help the grid to become you know, more reliable, if you will. Today's electricity flow model, we've talked about that, but quick recap. Today's electricity flow model is very hierarchical. You have large-scale generation, then you have the transmission, and then you have the distribution and consumption. We all know what that means. Moving forward, this grid is changing. What is changing? We're adding solar and wind in the US on the large scale, like in California and the Tehachapi Desert. We're adding a lot of wind. And then we are adding solar. You know, we're adding all sorts of solar concentrated, CS technology. And what that will do is that due to the intermittency that we talked about, you need to have some storage, right? So here's some large-scale storage on the transmission side. And that means your interfaces between the generation and storage are going to change. That's changing in America as we speak. In the homes, people are buying electric cars. Today, they're charging electric cars, and if everybody charges at 6 p.m. in the evening, there's another mini spike. That's not good. Well, why don't you plug in at 6 p.m. and just in your mobile app say, I need to leave at 8 a.m. or 6 a.m., and let the system take over. So that's the kind of system that I have developed right now that has finished its testing in the campus. Solar, people are adding solar on the rooftops. Now, Germany is certainly the solar rooftop king of the world. Well, you know, and they have gone through some very interesting experiences, you know, plus and minus. And America is sort of now starting. We're like 15, 20 years behind. But people are starting to add because of the incentives that are being offered by the utilities. Just our local utility offered, just literally last week, they have offered some programs that, you know, that allow you to basically sell power back into the grid, depending on how much you can actually produce. They don't want every little mom and pop to do it, but they want some reasonable amount of kilowatts and kilowatt hours to go in. But they have that, and then that means your interface between the consumption, and again I go back to the terminology that Terry Moen used, which is prosumer. I'm a strong believer of this word prosumer. That means you're a producer and a consumer. That's what he meant when he said prosumer. And that means that interface also changes, right? And that's a lot of change for both on the transmission operator as well as on the distribution side. So pretty much it's change everywhere. And eventually your interface between the distribution and transmission will change. So what are the technologies, right, that are going to go into this? I mean, the technologies are the stuff that we know. In the last presentation, you saw smart sensors, little sensors, okay? And so you have sensors. You're monitoring things everywhere. You also have, communications, right? You need to get the data back out. If you, have some sensor that has been installed, that is measuring, let's say, some stress on a wire, then you need to get the data back out to control center, go make the decision. So you have the communications. You have the software, the systems. Then you have the control piece, right? Now that you know what's to be done, you need to have that SCADA or just non-SCADA type control. So a lot of the technologies might be the same, but some of them are new, but it's putting them all together and making them work. That's critical. So UCLA has a cogeneration power plant, and that average is 39, peak is 50. It's nice and green, and that's just a picture of the power plant. I'm jumping into the UCLA's infrastructure, and what you see here is on the left is the utility, and that comes in through the smart meters. And then inside we have our own buildings and labs, and we have our electric cars now that are getting plugged in, and we have our loads, right? So this is, UCLA you can think is like a little city. It is actually, it has a population of 65,000, which actually in America is a pretty decent sized little town, okay? 65,000, and I know for India 65,000 is nothing, but there are many utilities that are smaller than UCLA in America. There's probably, I think 1,000 utilities in America that are smaller than UCLA as a utility. America has about 3,000 utilities, by the way, if anybody cares to know. So what's the first thing we did to make the smart microgrid? We added communications, a lot of wireless communications on campus to send the data from point A to point B. So we added Wi-Fi, we added Zigbee. Zigbee is a low-power wireless carrier of data, a smart energy profile 1.0 and now 2.0. So we did all that, and then we, of course, are now adding some PLC. And the reason we're adding PLC is because when you get to certain parts of the building, wireless doesn't work if there's too much metal, or it doesn't work reliably, and if you want reliable communications, then you may need some PLC. Now, what does it mean? It means that we're turning the world of the power grid upside down. The existing power grid, the control flow is one way, the information flow is one way, and the power flow is one way, always top to bottom, or in this case, left to right. But with this new power grid, everything will be two-way. Why? Because information is going to flow. There was a discussion about how to make a microgrid work in the previous panel, and plug and play will be one way to make it work, in which you take plug your solar system in, and it should tell the control center, I'm here, I'm ready to sell power, this is the price, are you willing to buy? Why not? So that's the kind of stuff I think is going to happen, and we're experimenting with some of those concepts in UCLA with electric cars and with solar. And so that means your communication is going to sometimes start right inside your microgrid, and you're not waiting for the big utility to tell you what to do. You're telling them what you want. So communications, right? Control, sometimes even the control might be from bottom to top. And then power flow. Look at that. We are storing power at night in the electric car and sending it back to the grid in the daytime. It's called vehicle to grid. And we are sending power back into the grid. Why not? If a car can do it, and if you can find a market for it, why not? At night, wholesale prices of electricity, for those of you who know, sometimes fall in the negative territory. Well, why not get paid to charge your car, and in the daytime, so let's say you bought it at -2 cents, and in the daytime sell it for 10, 15 cents per unit, and you're doing okay. Solar is, of course, meant to send power back to the grid. When we started, when the world started on the path of residential solar many, many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, remember originally the concept was, oh, we're just going to use solar for heating water and all that stuff in the home, solar thermal. Well, today, if you just use the solar for your own home, that's a total waste. There's no business case for that in the US. The business case is really to sell it to the grid. And similarly, I argue with electric car. You can have storage. There were some good presentations about frequency markets, and I really enjoyed those presentations, because why can't the battery in your car be used as a piece of a larger solution for aggregated storage offerings, for the high-speed storage offerings, which were on sort of on the bottom left side of that big curve where you had the pumped hydro on the top right. You remember that chart? Okay. So on the bottom left for the high speed, and certainly battery is not a supercapacitor, but the lithium-ion battery response time is pretty good. I know, because when I drive the car, I'll tell you that thing goes as fast as a Mercedes-Benz. Okay, so this thing, the lithium-ion technology can respond fast. So why not use it to regulate? Why not use it for regulatory services and ancillary services and control services? Frequency regulation being one of the examples. So now I'm going to jump into the electric vehicle project. Our philosophy from the start, when I started this research many years ago, my philosophy was that when you're creating a system and you have the opportunity to create a system, you've got to be smart about it. And what is the meaning of smart? To me, smart is an iterative thing. So first of all, the consumer, I think, is the smartest person. The human beings are the smartest people that make things smart. So you see the electric vehicle operator there, that person who's driving the electric car, if they're not happy with whatever you provide, no one's going to care. And second is the garage operator. This is the person who buys the charging station, installs it, spent $1,000 on the charging stations. In America, our installation cost is high because of the labor cost. The electrician labor cost in America is horrendously expensive. Even though they say union labor is $50 to $75 per hour, they will never work alone, so there's always two of them. So you're actually paying $150 per hour. I think you can get many more electricians here in India for that money. So our installation cost far exceeds our hardware cost in America for stuff like this. But that fellow is going to install it, and he or she has to install it by the US labor laws or whatever they are. And so now all of a sudden they're sitting on this $3,000 to $4,000 cost. They're going to recover it. They're going to charge you for the electricity. So now they can't sell it to you at, let's say, 6 cents at night and 12 cents in the daytime, depending on where you are, but let's say that's one of the pricing models. They may have to sell it to you at 12 cents at night and 24 cents. Now the question is, if the cost of electricity is this much, will you buy it? So my thought was, well, why not bring the grid operator, the utility, into the picture? Because they're the ones with the real-time pricing. They're the ones with the grief. They're the ones who are saying, please don't charge in the afternoon, but please take my electricity at night. Because if you look in some of the parts of the grid in America, your 24-hour cycle looks like this, where the peak to trough might be 5 to 1 or 6 to 1. That means you are wasting such a lot of capacity. At night, that's why the price of electricity in America in many parts of the grid is negative. And so take that really cheap electricity or free electricity or negative price electricity and put it in your cars, and now all of a sudden you have a interesting value proposition. So our system takes signals from the grid operator, and then it optimizes. What does it optimize? It optimizes giving you the electricity in terms of how many kilowatts I'm going to pump into your car, and also over time, right? I'm giving you 2 kilowatts now, 15 seconds later I'm giving you 1.8 kilowatts. So I'm actually doing my cycles. Of course, I'm not going to harm your battery. I need to make sure that. But that's what my system does. It takes all of these, and it is sitting on the internet, it's sitting on the cloud, it's getting all this data. How is it getting data from the user? The EV user has apps, and on the apps you can enter your preference profile once and forget about it. Or you can continue to keep changing those things. And then you can change your, you go to the office and you say, I'm going to leave at 6 p.m. Suddenly you change your mind, oh, I'm going to leave at 2 p.m. Go and change your preference profile. And my algorithm will go and re-optimize. And of course, if you want to be fully charged in 1 hour versus your friend is willing to wait 15 hours, who do you think should get cheaper per kilowatt hour price? Of course, your friend. They're willing to wait till 10 p.m. at night when the energy price is cheap. So and give them nothing till 5 p.m. and then charge them. So whereas you want it at peak or you want it now, you pay. It's like the airline ticket, okay? You want to purchase an airline ticket business class, right now to fly to Los Angeles and back, it's about $12,000, right? If you were willing to fly 6 months later or willing to fly any day of the next 6 months, any day. So there might be some day when nobody's willing to fly, in the middle of the night, there's a horrible flight, or some of these flights may take their 4 segments. So if you're willing to fly 4 segments, sometimes it's crazy, right? You want to fly to London and take you to Singapore, then to Tokyo, then to London, and the fare is cheap. What happened? There is some random capacity. Same thing. There is random capacity on the grid, and we utilize that. Okay. So mobile apps. Here's some of the interface screens from our mobile apps. I'll talk a little bit about the first screen, and we have 7 different algorithms, and there's a lot of detail, and I have 15 or so people working on this project. I'm not going to waste your time, but let me tell you, the screen in the front left, right, which is, I think I may be able to use some pointing device. All right, so I'm gonna point, let's see, on this one. So this screen here, okay, and or on that screen over there. What that screen says is, it says, it allows you to say how much maximum time are you willing to wait. So the person says 3 hours. What's the maximum price, right? So you can move that bar and you can say, well, I'm willing to pay 15 cents, right? If you said that I'm only willing to pay 4 or 5 cents, that will not even be in the allowed region, right? So there's a constraint. So the moment you say I'm willing to that I need it in 3 hours, the system will almost force you to give a higher price. So the system is a smart system, just to give you an example. And some of the things that are shown on the back screen there. So here you see the interface, that tells you, the charging status and all sorts of useful variables through the monitors that are there on the device. And on the, there are maps, and you can look at where the charging stations are and all those good things. So this shows you another screen. Shows you, what's the status of your car right now, what algorithm is running, and so on and so forth. This is again on your mobile app. This is a technology that really can't see very well in this picture, but you see on the wall there is the wall mount charging station that was built by us. And then this is one of our students. What he's doing is he's running a little test, but the hardware, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, that he has developed, is a little Zigbee sensor that takes data from the CAN bus of a car, which is a bus in the car, and it sends that wirelessly directly into the charging station. And that is information that gives our control center information about the status of the charge in your car. It's very critical. I mean, if you have already if your car is 50% full and it's a Nissan Leaf, then you know that you only need about 12.5 kilowatt hours at that point. Okay, versus if you had a Chevy Volt, which was 50% full, then you would have there's a smaller battery. So that kind of information is useful. Then we have something called a control center. What is this control center and why is it important? Well, remember I said the parking garage operator, right? The parking garage operator needs to know which parking where are you parked in, and the Anaheim parking garage, or the Santa Monica, or the UCLA parking garage. So under the UCLA parking garage, you can see it goes through each of these, stations, and it tells you all the status and active power, reactive power, all sorts of variables that you could possibly dream of. But the garage operators there, UCLA parking garages collectively have 25,000 cars. If out of 25,000 cars in a year or two, if there is 1,000 or 2,000 electric cars, that's a lot of cars. I mean, already we are up to about 40 or so. And so there's a lot of electric cars. And so being able to manage and monitor and control is very critical. And so this system does that for you. And then, of course, if you need to print out screens and all those things and look at the maps of where they are, and so it's a control center, just like a SCADA control center. It's a SCADA-like control center. Suppose the control center operator wishes to study the energy charging profile of different cars. So we call this a station. And in a station, you can have N cars parked. And and I'll talk about the philosophy there. The philosophy there is maximization of resource. Remember I said, if everybody plugs in, suppose if some of us are plugging into a garage, and let's say there's a 100 kilowatt capacity for a given garage. If, let's say, there is 40 cars plugged in, and each one of us operating at 5 kilowatts, I'm out of time? 5 minutes? All right. And so you have 40 cars at 5 kilowatts, you need 200 kilowatts. You have 100 kilowatt capacity. It's not an insurmountable problem. You do smart scheduling. You do smart scheduling based on, remember I said grid capacity, garage capacity, user preference. When does different users want to be charged at different points in time? So you do all that, and so that's the kind of curve that happens. That just shows you some of the installations across the campus. This shows you our energy storage setup. Why do we have an energy storage setup? Because what we want to do is there's some people willing to pay a fortune for energy that is green. So you take the solar energy that's shining. So we are putting a 50 kilowatt solar. You take the energy from the 50 kilowatt solar, put it into the 50 kilowatt battery, and now that's available when you drive your car in. So if you're willing to pay 50 cents per kilowatt hour, you can get green energy as opposed to the regular energy. So some people really want to be green, and they're willing to pay a price. Okay. There is something called aggregation services. The idea of an aggregation service is, let's say the utility gives you a full function. This is what your kilowatt performance should look like for the whole day, for a 24-hour cycle. And you have certain n number of cars. How do you map that into the cars? So that's another thing that we do. Okay. Just shows you a couple of types of cars. That's a Chevy Volt, that's a Nissan Leaf. So that particular Nissan Leaf is the one I drive. So these cars, as you can, you'll see, are getting more and more popular. We have also now the Ford Focus in the US. We have the BMW electric that also works, and then the electric Smart. So there's a bunch of, that's by Mercedes. In the interest of time, just going to move on here. This is a student of mine, and he's basically demonstrating, and actually it's interesting. The day we did this demonstration, this gentleman who's sitting next to me, standing next to me, that head belongs to Dr. Dhande, the ex-director of IIT Kanpur, who had visited us on that day. Unfortunately, on that picture, his face doesn't show up. I have another one which his face does show up. But what he's doing is he's combining solar with battery storage, and he's demonstrating that on one of our parking garages. This is the battery unit that we use for testing, lithium iron phosphate. Now, remember I talked of vehicle to grid. In vehicle to grid, what do? You use the car battery as an energy source. And just like if you can charge your car when the battery is cheap, why not discharge it when it's expensive? Well, there's a problem with that. We all know that it'll lower the battery life. But, well, guess what? If you do shallow discharge, it does not necessarily lower the battery life. And you have to do the calculation, right? I'm not promising that it won't, but you have to do the calculation. So the city of Los Angeles, I think we are one of the most proactive cities. I think at this point, Los Angeles probably has the largest number of electric cars in the country. The mayor of the city of Los Angeles, that's an article in which the mayor and I were quoted. He organized a electric vehicle workshop in UCLA, and he's a UCLA alum, by the way. Very strong proponent of electric vehicles, solar technology, hybrid, and so on and so forth. That is Secretary of Energy, Dr. Stephen Chu, Professor Stephen Chu. He actually is one of the pioneers in this whole business, and also Nobel Prize winner. And for those of you who don't know, I used to be a professor at UC Berkeley when I was a postdoc there in 1991. Just an amazing person. Drove the renewable energy strategy for the country, and I think has literally under Obama's leadership, this man has changed the direction of the country and has brought America sort of into the modern world of energy. Countries like Germany and Denmark, and these guys were so much ahead of us, Holland. This is effectively the CEO of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Ron Nichols. These are some of the people who participated with us. And just to show you, the reason I have these slides is to show you the importance of smart grid and the importance of the leadership in the city of Los Angeles. I think that's very critical. This is Assistant Secretary of Energy Patricia Hoffman. She visited UCLA. This is Mike Peavy. He's the chairman of the California Public Utilities Commission. He was a speaker at my conference last year. And so these are the people that are driving this whole industry in America. They really believe, and Los Angeles, we're very lucky because we have sun. We are right by the ocean, so we have offshore wind. We have onshore wind also. And then we have now the largest number, almost We were number 2 behind San Diego, but I've been told unofficially we are number 1 in terms of electric cars. This is Dr. Rajendra Pachauri. I met him last year, and we're hoping he'll visit us. And then this is the ambassador from India to the U.S., Mrs. Nirupama Rao. I hosted an event for them at UCLA for the, and basically the interest was in smart grid and renewable energies. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I hope I was on time.